Hi, I'm Stephen with AlbertaUrbanGarden.ca. So today we're going to make some hard apple cider. So the first thing you'll need is apples. So we're going to take some of these apples and bring them to the Whiskey Tango Brewery. In this episode we're going to go start to finish making hard apple cider. So a couple of weeks ago we collected apples from Mr. Bowker and Mrs. Bowker's yard. They've got 2 apple trees there. So this is the culmination of that. Tonight we're going to bottle it. But before we do that, we're going to jump back and show you all the steps involved. So in this video, what you'll see is a couple places you can click to jump to other parts of the video. So if you've already completed a step, feel free to click, and that will bring you to the very next step of this process. So as you can see, there's plenty of apples left on this tree. Although we are a little bit late in the season, lots of apples have fallen. We won't really use these apples because they're a little bit damaged and can sour our batch. So this is apple tree 1. We're going to take apples from. This tree was actually pruned in the spring and is yielding much larger apples, probably about 25% larger, and is holding on to its apples quite a bit better than the one that was unpruned. This is apple tree 2, and this one was unpruned this year and is yielding quite a few apples, but they're quite a bit smaller and they are dropping a little bit faster. So the apple on the right, the larger one, is from apple tree 1, and from the left is apple tree 2. You can notice the size difference here, and that has to do with proper pruning of the tree. So we finished collecting the apples, about half of that blue tote, in a full 5-gallon pail.
Good luck to the juice man.
The next thing I've done is I've rinsed the apples off, just cool tap water to rinse them off. And during that time you look for damage. So these are the good ones in the water, and these are the ones that I pulled out. You look for bird damage like that, or this looks quite splotchy, and when you cut this one open, and it doesn't look like a good flesh. I'm not going to use these ones because I don't have to here, but these predominantly should be the good ones. So as we go to the next stage, which is juicing, we'll actually be cutting them in half, and we'll be able to look for damage again, just to make sure that we're not putting stuff that may be rotten into our hard apple cider. Now it's time to juice the apples. So what you're going to need is a sanitized primary fermenter, a stir stick, a juicer. You can use an apple crusher and press as well, but for those of us with limited space, little juicers fit better on the shelf than the big press. And the apples. These are the apples we picked today. But you can also use store-bought apples, and all you need to really do with any of these apples is cut them, quarter them, put them in an 1/8. This will fit down the chute quite a bit better. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to turn this on. I'm going to drop in some bits. As you can see, the juice comes out this spout right into the primary fermenter, and the pulp comes out the back side. You just need to make sure you're watching that so you don't end up with it overflowing and making a mess so that your wife gives you crap, because that'll happen. So I'm going to continue to do this. There's a huge bucket of apples behind us. I'm going to get through that, and then I'll show you the next stage. So we are finally done juicing these apples, and it's kind of hard to tell, but it looks like we got just over 5 liters. What we wanted is to get enough juice to make either 3.75 liters or 7.4 liters, which is 1 gallon or 2 gallons, because most recipes on the internet show for 1 gallon recipes. So with that foam broken down, it looks like we ended up just about 7.5 liters. So we're in pretty good shape here to make a 2-gallon batch. We did have a lot of wastage, lots of the apples. We were probably about a week late on harvesting these apples, but at the end of the day, you live, you learn. We got about half or 2/3 of the apples were good for brewing. The other third, that's okay. They'll make great compost. So these apples are awesome for the compost. The apple mush, all that. If you're not going to use it to make an applesauce or whatever, this stuff is great for your compost. High sugar, breaks down quickly. It'll enrich just everything in that compost. The next step here is Camden tablets. These are a sterilizer. What it basically does is it puts a pause on the natural yeast in here. It doesn't quite sterilize them or kill them. It does in some cases, but for the most part it just puts it a pause. And then tomorrow, in 24 hours, when we put our yeast in here that we want, it will give that yeast kind of the edge up. And what it'll do is that the yeast we want, the champagne yeast we want, will quite literally outcompete it. So this is 1 to 2 this says 1 to 2 tablets per gallon if used as a sterilizer for wine must. This is kind of a wine must here. Allow the mixture to stand for 24 hours, stir well, and then add yeast. So we are going to crush these tablets. So I'm going to take 2 of them. So just crush these between 2 Camden tablets between 2 spoons. Makes a nice fine powder. Make sure to get the rest of that. Done with these, and then just mix it in well. It's important to mix that in well because it's sitting on that that pulp on the top, and we want that in the liquid so that it can do its job. So there's another way that you can actually sterilize this instead of the Camden tablets. You can bring this to a kind of a simmer, not a boil, but a simmer, and basically pasteurize this material. I'm choosing not to do that because I'm a little worried that if I do that, it will take some of the more delicate flavors out of these apples. And as we saw earlier, we don't have a lot of apples to spare. So we're not going to do a yeast start today. So basically what a yeast start is you take some of this product here, you take a little bit of sugar, a little bit of wine nutrients, and you get it started in a separate container. All that really allows is the yeast to get a good head start. I don't think that'll be a problem here today, so we're not going to do it. So if you do want to do hard apple cider from a commercially available apple cider, non-alcoholic of course, the preservatives in there can cause some issues. The way that you want to get around that is to do the yeast starter. That'll make sure that they've got a robust community able to kind of handle that and to get around the preservatives and kind of overcome the preservatives. If you do that yeast starter and you're using commercially available cider that has preservatives in it, it'll overcome it. If it doesn't have preservatives, it's still a good idea. One of the reasons why we sterilize this and we use the Camden tablets or we do a pasteurizing on this is the fact that there is yeast on the apples. On the outside of the apples there's yeast, and that's just naturally occurring. Now if you wanted to go what I'm going to call old school here, you can just simply crush this up and let it start. What you're going to end up with is a pretty inconsistent product from batch to batch and lower alcohol content. I want a more consistent product. Alcohol content is a nice added bonus, but I want a more consistent product, so I'm choosing to use the Camden tablets here. We're going to come back in 24 hours. Once the Camden tablets have had their time to work, then we'll add the yeast and begin the fermentation process. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this up and leave it exactly where it is. Then I'm going to clean up, because if I don't, I'll get in trouble, and we'll see you tomorrow. So it's been 24 hours. So the next step is to get the yeast in there. So the Camden tablets have done their magic. They've made this ready for the yeast. So what you'll need in this step is a packet of champagne yeast. Champagne yeast works very, very well for this. If you go to your brewing store, they might have a particular one that works well with apple cider, but champagne yeast will do exceptionally well. You'll also need yeast nutrient. Although there's tons of sugar in here, there's not a ton of nutrients for the yeast. And the yeast nutrient, you need 1 tablespoon, so just clean tablespoon. You'll need to sterilize and clean your spoon again. And then one of the recipes I found said 1 dry measuring cup of brown sugar and 1 dry cup of white sugar should be fine for 1 gallon. Now I've got nearly 2 gallons in here, but I'm only going to use 1 and 1 just because I don't want too sweet of a product, and that's just personal taste. You can do 2 and 2 if you've got 2 gallons, but I don't see a need for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the sugar and then mix it around. The brown sugar should bring a nice taste to this. So tomorrow we're going to have to strain this. So tomorrow I am going to have to strain this. There is quite a bit of pulp. My juicer just worked a little bit too well. If you get maybe a finer mesh juicer, then you'll get less pulp in this, but then you'll probably get less juice as well. You could use kind of a pectolase, which breaks down the cellular structure, but I'm going to try it without today. Why not? I got more than I was expecting. So we got the sugar mixed in. So now it's time for the yeast nutrient. The yeast nutrient just basically provides the stuff that yeast need outside of sugar in order to procreate well. Yes, I did say procreate. It's 1 tablespoon. So that's again a dry measurement. And you just kind of level it off in the bag. And then again, sprinkle that in. We're saving the yeast for last. You want to make sure that it's nice and clipped up so that you don't end up with moisture getting in there. Again, another mix. I'm choosing to leave this in the primary fermenter for another day, just to allow the yeast some time with some oxygen to really get going in here. I didn't do the yeast starter, so this will assist. Now, most recipes call for about 3/4 of a packet for 1 gallon, but you don't need that. So just sprinkle it in. And a light stir after this. I'm going to leave this for 24 hours and then we'll put it in the carboy. So it's day 3. So this has been fermenting actively for 24 hours. So in this step what you'll need is a funnel, a bit of kind of this cheesecloth filtering stuff, and what I've done is I've actually cut this to about 1/4, folded it a couple of times and put it into the funnel, and that's to help get some of the pulp out, because this the juicer that we used was a little excessive. The other things you'll need is some sterile water and a bung with an air lock on it, and that's for the second step here. So we're just going to use the tap to filter the must, because this is now called must. It's an active brewing, and we're going to filter into this nice clean 3-gallon carboy. So what ended up happening is that juicer that I have works really well. Most of what ended up in the primary fermenter was a very pulpy apple juice / sauce. So what I ended up doing, the cheesecloth was working too slow and I required a little bit of mechanical force. So I jury-rigged myself a little press. So I used a fine mesh strainer and just a corresponding bowl that fit into it, and slowly kind of press that in there. Got to give credit where credit is due. This is completely my wife's idea. No need for an apple press when you can go into the kitchen and find stuff that works. It takes a little bit longer, but regardless. So I have what I'm going to say is about 2 gallons of juice, and the yeast should be working in there just fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm not overly concerned with like a strong, heavy flavor. I actually prefer a little bit of a lighter flavor. So I'm going to take bottled water. I'm actually going to top that up a little bit closer to the top so that we end up with a less headspace in the carboy. And the reason why I use bottled water is twofold. Number one, the most important one, is chlorine. There is no chlorine in this particular water. The other thing is the water we have here in Alberta is very hard, and that does come out in the taste of whether it's a hard apple cider or wine or beer. I just find it comes through the taste and comes through very sharply having those molecules in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this up. So it should take about 4 of them. My buddy Pickles just came down. Can't see her, but she's standing under the camera. She thinks I'm nuts, sitting here talking to myself. You can fill this, I saw on the internet, you can fill this with things like vodka and stuff, but I don't see why. I'm sure with the extra sugar that we've added, we'll end up with a little bit of PG-18 product anyways, so I don't see the need to waste some good vodka. Now what's next? This is an airlock. So what you want is, again, sterile water. You fill this up to the line. There's a faint line on all of these. And what this airlock does is it prevents oxygen from coming back down, but the carbon dioxide can escape, and the water acts as kind of a barrier while allowing the carbon dioxide to escape, but won't let the oxygen in, which will sour it. So I'm just gonna wipe this to make sure that I get a good solid lock. Press her in there nice and tight, and we should see very shortly this starting to bubble away. So next we're going to leave it for 15 days. You can check the specific gravity, or you can do the bubble count. So we've now let this ferment for 2 weeks, and fermentation has basically ceased. That doesn't mean that there is an active yeast in here. It just means that it's done this current phase. So what we're going to do is we're going to carefully plunge this down and siphon. So I've now transferred this into the primary fermenter from which I'll do the bottling. If you do have a sediment problem, or you've sucked up a lot of sediment, you can rack it, let it rest for a day or two, and then rack it again. That'll help you clear it out. What I have here is a resealable pressurized container. You have to make sure that these are pressure rated. So what I've done is I've actually bought these from the liquor store, consumed what was in, and then continue to reuse it for my own brew. Every once in a while you will have to replace the seal. Some people recommend every time. What I do is I flip it from side to side, and every once in a while I do replace it. I have cleaned and sanitized these containers earlier today, and what I'll do now is I'll bottle it into these. I don't think you'll require any extra sugar, because apples do have quite a bit of sugar, and I did add a little bit of sugar earlier in this process. I do have my bottling tube here, and what this is a tube that has a plug on here. When you hit the bottom, it will release. It's got a glass end that, after I move this forward, snugly fits into the tap component of the primary fermenter. You can also use a suction method where you suck it down, you create that suction, and as the bottle fills, you make sure that it comes higher than the water column within the container. This way you don't have to do that. You simply lift the tube and it stops the flow. So I get a couple of bottles ready in a row, and what I do is I open this tap. You just watch for it to come up the bottle, and it usually doesn't take that long to do. It's easier if the bottom of the bottle is flat, because then the little pin can touch it. So before it hits the top, you switch it out. You just move to the next one. So, seal this up, making sure that the plunger is centered. And we'll come back at Christmas when this has had some time to age and for the flavors to develop, and taste it. So for the next 2 weeks it should carbonate, and if you are quite eager to get into it for Thanksgiving, you can. I am just going to wait until Christmas when my family is in town to enjoy this. Just a note about the bottles, you can take off the labels fairly easily on these bottles. Some of the other bottles require a little bit more effort to remove, and all I do for those is I actually take a knife and soak the bottle in hot water and part of the cleaner and remove it with a knife later. Just take the knife and attack it, and if you have any of the residual glue, you can use Goo Gone on it and it works quite well. But these beer bottles, I've gotten a little bit lazy and not removed the label. Just going to finish up bottling these and we'll come back in a second. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it very much. If you like this video, please subscribe or join us at Facebook at www.facebook.com/Alberta Urban Garden. Have a great day.